The Chelsea Hotel has so much history. History that dates back to its first opening in 1884. Dating back to the 1950s all the way to the 1980s, there have been many celebrities that have stood at the Chelsea Hotel. Its haunted history also still stands with the hotel, since so much has happened inside of the 12-story red brick building. From the alleged haunting of film writer Dylan Thomas's ghost in room 205, to the sudden and suspicious apartment fire that happened where one person was killed, and the 1968 suicide of writer Charles R. Jackson in room 174. The Chelsea Hotel has always attracted many with its history. Two cases surrounding the Chelsea Hotel mysteries is the case of Nancy Spungeon, Sid Vicious's girlfriend and popular drag queen superstar, Club Kid Christina. On October 12, 1978, Nancy Spungeon was found stabbed to death in room 100, the room where both Nancy and Sid stood for their stay in New York City. Ultimately, Sid Vicious was put in jail for the death of Nancy Spungeon, although many others believe that at the time of Nancy Spungeon's murder, there were other people hanging about in room 100 while Sid Vicious slept from a drug and alcohol-fueled night. Others believe that Sid Vicious did commit the crime and was too intoxicated on drugs to even remember what exactly occurred that night. It was alleged that Sid and Nancy did have their arguments and fights every now and then, but many close to the punk rocker feel like someone else had been involved in the murder. Although possible, Sid confessed on paper while out on bail that him and Nancy decided to make a death pact with one another. Nancy Spungeon was found lying on the bathroom floor with a stab wound to her abdomen. She was dead on scene. It was known that Nancy Spungeon, even as a child, was an emotionally disturbed young woman. At age 17, she dropped out of college and moved to New York City. A few years later, she followed Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan of the Heartbreakers to London, where she ultimately met Sid Vicious, also known as Simon Ritchie. From the age of 11 to 16, Nancy Spungeon spent time at a boarding school for children with special needs, and even spent some time at a mental institution where she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Following the days before her death, Nancy Spungeon bought a knife, the knife that would ultimately kill her in the end. Some also even speculated that with Nancy Spungeon's mental condition, she could have taken her own life. Was it a suicide? Did Sid Vicious really kill Nancy, or was it all over a drug deal gone bad from someone who was possibly hanging out in room 100 with Sid and Nancy, or someone who didn't know them too well but either sold drugs to the couple or hung around the hotel just to creep around and stalk other people that occupied the hotel? Till today, the truth remains a mystery. The late 80s in New York City was a hotspot for partygoers, many who came from other countries and states just to spend some time in New York City's bustling party spot that included a group of drag queens respectfully calling themselves the Club Kids. The Club Kids enjoyed getting paid to make club appearances in places such as the Pyramid Club. They also appeared in daytime TV shows such as the Geraldo Rivera Show. Drugs and partying fueled their very loud sense of fashion and self-expression. One of those club kids that really stood out from the crowd was a German trans woman from Pittsburgh that people knew as Club Kid Christina. From her outfits to her large personality, Christina was also known as the firecracker of the group, known to some as the crazy partygoer that flung a knife around into a crowd of partygoers while celebrating her birthday. Christina was one of a kind. Unfortunately, it was alleged that she came from a very affluent and wealthy family that didn't want to have anything to do with her. So as a way of keeping her and her lifestyle quiet, her parents decided to pay for her expenses while she kept herself away from her own family. A sad reality that Christina dealt with while she decided to leave her in her presence in New York City. Filmmaker Nelson Sullivan had seemed to become one of the very few true friends that Christina had. Not only was Christina intimidating, but she was also an interesting subject to watch, as Nelson Sullivan would frequently pay Christina a visit in room 323 at the Chelsea just to film her while following her every move. Christina didn't mind it one bit, as she loved the attention that Nelson Sullivan was giving her. Unfortunately, Club Kid Christina was found dead of an apparent suicide. Exactly 1 month after Christina's death, Nelson Sullivan himself would die from a heart attack. Many have speculated that it may have been a possibility that Christina may have been shot by someone she knew. Christina was found with an alleged self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. One other question still remains. Were there drugs involved? And if so, did it play a part in her death? On the weeks before her death, it was alleged that Christina was hiding at the Chelsea Hotel from police following an incident at the Pyramid Club where Christina was said to have poked someone in the eye with a microphone stand. Following the incident, it was alleged that the individual involved filed assault charges against Christina. Christina was afraid to go to jail, so she stood at the Chelsea Hotel while waiting for the incident to die down. Close friends of Christina alleged that after the incident, Christina was not herself. One former club kid pointed out that Christina was kind of lapsing into a state of psychosis. Aside from this, it was also known that Christina also had people around her that despised her. In one video, recorded by her friend Nelson Sullivan, she explains how she hadn't really realized that at one point, someone had attempted to throw acid at her. Was it a person that secretly disliked her that killed her? Or was it the pressure of having assault charges put on her from the incident at the Pyramid Club that caused her demise? Was Christina suffering in silence from the hate that she was receiving from others? Who is to blame for Christina's death? Club Kid Christina was allegedly found dead on June 1st, 1989, in room 323.
You have to ring the buzzer, these guys at the Chelsea. They won't let you in. I came to see Christina. I think that's room 323. Is that correct, Chris Smith? Oh. Christina. Hi, Joss.
I'm not at all full.
Oh my God, Christina, oh my divine.
Except for you always.
God.
Whenever you come. I mean, honestly, I'm incapable of performing on it. It is anything other than, well, a sex object, really, and I mean, ultimately, having people take whatever you've got, never tried it before, honest. I mean, getting out of bed, I mean, it's extremely important that you perform at something for some reason. And it takes about a cigarette and a cup of coffee to really get me. There's always some mistress with me. It's actually is a window open, although you still have to be careful with the pattern because it's still actually being held up there with crazy people. And the other one, there's actually another chair over there where you can get part of it and you always know what you're doing. It's a really gorgeous spot.
Many of you might be wondering, what's the full story on the Wonderland Murders? Who were the victims and the players, and what specifically went down on July 1st, 1981? The house itself was leased to Joy Miller, a longtime heroin addict who separated from her husband and Beverly Hills lifestyle for a life that only satisfies you with drugs and danger. While Joy Miller was leasing the Wonderland property, there were also other questionable people occupying the space. All were suspected members of the infamous Wonderland drug trafficking ring in LA. At that point, they had been known as being one of the most successful cocaine distributors of Los Angeles County. A few players, including one associate described, were Ron Launis, age 37, Billy Devrel, Joy Miller's boyfriend at the time, age 44, Joy Miller herself, age 46, and Barbara Richardson, age 22. The only survivor of the Wonderland bloodshed was Susan Launis, age 30. Susan Launis was also the wife of Ron Launis. On July 1, 1981, the suspect or suspects barged into the Wonderland home, beat everyone inside to death, leaving one victim barely clinging to life. The Wonderland gang were said to be known affiliates and small-time drug workers of Eddie Nash, a big-time drug dealer and club owner who never really liked to play tag with his money. Eddie Nash, also known as Adel Garib Nasrallah, who built his nightclub empire by starting off his business with a measly hot dog stand. His growing nightclub business included 36 locations, including the Paradise Ballroom. This was what reportedly brought Eddie Nash's interest into the drug trafficking trade. He eventually started selling drugs at his nightclubs. With more money coming in, Eddie Nash was said to have allegedly used members of the Wonderland gang to help him sell these drugs. As small of an establishment that they were compared to Eddie Nash and his reputation, it was rumored that the Wonderland gang was recruited by John Holmes. John Holmes allegedly befriended nightclub owner Eddie Nash while he was going through financial difficulty. John Holmes eventually developed a really bad cocaine habit that would affect both his work life and financial standing. It was reported that John Holmes was spending as much as $1,500 a day on drugs alone. At one point, he stopped getting offers to film more pornography videos once the adult film producers and directors realized how bad his drug habit really was. His cocaine habit got so bad that film directors had to leave a trail of cocaine for Holmes just to have him work on set. Holmes himself acknowledged his serious drug habit, saying that if anyone on set needed to find him, they'd most likely find him doing drugs in the restroom. Things took a turn for the worst when, on July 29, 1981, an event that occurred before the murders, Eddie Nash was robbed at his home. It was said that John Holmes once told his lawyer that Eddie Nash was ripe for robbery. John Holmes was never physically put in the robbery scene at the time when the robbery occurred. However, authorities believe that he was in fact instrumental in setting up the robbery, leaving Eddie Nash's door open for members of the Wonderland gang to walk in and rob Eddie Nash's home, since it was known that John Holmes did indeed hold a copy of Eddie Nash's house keys. It was said that the gang stole jewelry, cash, and of course, drugs. At the time of the incident, John Holmes and Eddie Nash's bodyguard Gregory DeWitt Dials were both present at the home. This caused major embarrassment for Eddie Nash and his establishments, being that his own bodyguard claimed to have been terrified while the robbery was taking place. The bodyguard received a minor gunshot wound while John Holmes was unharmed. It was alleged that he fell to his knees and asked the robbers for permission to say his prayers. At this point, Eddie Nash wanted revenge. It was alleged that Eddie Nash had forced John Holmes to help him come up with a plan to take down the Wonderland gang for robbing him blind. While Eddie Nash figured out who the masked culprits were, he soon figured out a very bloody and violent, sinister way to get them all back. It was later figured out by many that John Holmes was the alleged inside man who allegedly orchestrated the entire robbery, since it was known he had unpaid debts with Nash and the Wonderland crew. John also being the only obvious connection between the two. It was alleged that Nash figured out Holmes's role in the robbery, so as revenge, forced Holmes to put himself in the scene of the crime. This was evident when authorities checked the crime scene and found clues that led them to Holmes's presence while the crime was happening. There was no sign of breaking and entering. Neighbors told authorities that they witnessed a man yelling and begging for his life on that fateful day. All victims were already dead and covered in blood by the time police arrived at the residence. One victim, Susan Launis, was clinging to life. Ultimately, she survived, but suffered serious brain damage after the incident. It was said that the victims were beaten with lead pipes, leaving the last surviving victim with a crushed skull and no recollection of what exactly happened. John Holmes' palm prints were found near one of the victims, putting him at the scene of the crime. It was alleged that Holmes was also known to have a history of ratting on others. He was said to have been an informant while working as a porn star. He snitched on people he didn't get along with. His girlfriend Dawn Schiller noted that there was an entire array of individuals who were afraid that Holmes was going to report them to the police. Unfortunately, because of how the law works sometimes, John Holmes was acquitted in 1982, only serving 111 days in jail for contempt of court, since he refused to answer questions relating to Eddie Nash's involvement until he was sure that Nash was locked up in jail for a narcotics charge.
Holmes had been questioned recently about the 1981 bludgeon murders of 4 people in Laurel Canyon. Holmes refused to answer questions back then and was acquitted of the murders a year later. But a recent newspaper report said a new witness had surfaced and Holmes had been questioned on his deathbed. No other information was given.
In 1990, Eddie Nash's trial began relating to the murders. One juror caused a mistrial, and in 1991, Nash was acquitted entirely of the murders. In 2001, however, Nash was found guilty of racketeering that proved his involvement in the murders. He was also found guilty of bribing other witnesses and a juror, which put him in jail for a total of 1 year. In an interview with Holmes, he admitted to being present while the murders occurred, and even admitted to having one of the suspects point a gun at his head while threatening him in the process.
She's the one who took you to the Wonderland Drive.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes. That's how I met those people.
Did she play a part in this?
No, she was very heavy into drugs, and I picked her up on an on-ramp. She was going the same way I was, and if it's a girl and she's fairly attractive, I'll give her a ride. And we got to talking, and she recognized me, and she said, "You're really John Holmes?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You do any coke?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "So do I, but I'm out." So I gave her a hit of coke, and she said, "Where are you going to?" And I said, "I'm going to go pick up some coke." And she said, "Some friends of mine have the best coke in the world." And I said, "No, I have the best coke in the world." Anyway, I took her out to the Wonderland House and dropped her off.